Hello students, welcome to your video on lesson 9.1b. This is an extension of what we were talking about in our last video about square roots, finding square roots of perfect square numbers or estimating where a square root would be if it's not taking the square root of a perfect square. In this video we're going to talk about how and why square roots can be negative. And how we can actually have two different answers for the same square root question. Okay, so I want to start by thinking about these three multiplication problems right here. In this case, a -2 times -2, or -5 times -5, or -10 times -10. Hopefully we can agree that all of these, if I were to multiply these numbers together, these integers, I would get a positive integer as my answer, right? A negative times another negative is always a positive. So this first one here, -2 times -2 is equal to 4. -5 times -5 is equal to 25. And -10 times -10 is equal to 100. So as we can see in each of these cases, when we multiply these negative integers or these negative numbers together, essentially by themselves, right? -2 times a -2, -5 times a -5. When we multiply them by themselves, we get a positive integer as an answer, okay? So I want you to keep this in mind while we then also think about answering this question. Okay, what is the square root of 25? So remember from our last video what this symbol or what this question is really asking. It's asking what number, when I multiply it times itself, is going to give me this number underneath the radical symbol right here. What number, when I multiply it by itself, gives me 25? Now we've already talked about the square root of 25 being 5, which is true, right? Because 5 times 5 equals 25. So the square root of 25 absolutely is 5, because when I multiply 5 by itself, I get 25. So 5 is absolutely a square root of 25. But remember what we just had on our previous slide, right? We also had that -5 multiplied by -5 is equal to 25. So this indicates to me that when I multiply -5 times itself, I get 25, which means the square root of 25 could also be -5. Okay, and this is actually always true. Regardless of what square root you are doing, anytime you take a square root of a number, there are always two options. There's always a positive option, there's always a negative option. Okay? They're always the same number, but one is positive, one is negative, and they're both perfectly good options for doing a square root. Okay? And the reason is because when we take a negative number times itself, we get back to a positive. The same way when we do a positive times a positive, of course, we get a positive. So there's two different ways that we can multiply a number by itself and get 25. Either +5 times +5 or -5 times -5. So both of those need to be answers when we take the square root of 25, okay? Up until now, you have been answering this type of question, the square root of 25, by simply saying the square root of 25 is 5, which it absolutely is. But now we get to add another option. The square root of 25 is actually 5 or -5, okay? These two answers are both legitimate for the square root of 25. Okay, and like I said, it happens every time that you do a square root. All right, so for example, if I was asking you for the square root of 9, square root of 9, well, we talked about this in our last video, right? 9 is in our list of perfect square numbers, so we know the square root of 9 is 3. But the square root of 9 could also be -3. because -3 times another -3 gets me back to +9, right? A negative times a negative gets me a positive. So when we take a square root, just remember that you can have two different options, okay? So in your IXL practice for tomorrow, you're going to be asked either potentially for the positive square root of a number or the negative square root of a number, or possibly both. You might be asked for what is the positive and negative square root of some number, okay? Now, some of those examples are going to be ones that we don't necessarily just know, okay, right off the top of our heads. For example, you might be asked to do the square root of 0.0016, okay, some weird decimal like this. And this is something that we would do on a calculator, right? We would take the square root button on our calculator and put in 0.0016. Now I want to show you what happens when I do that on my calculator. If I take, in mine, I need to hit the second button, then my little square root symbol is right there in blue. So I get my square root symbol, and underneath it, I'm going to put 0.0016, I believe was my square root. Okay, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to hit enter, and I get 0.04. So 0.04 is my answer for this square root, okay? So this is equal to 0.04. Oops, 0.04. Okay? That's what my calculator told me, 0.04. However, we now know that there's another option. Okay, we know there's another option. The square root of 0.0016 could also be negative 0.04. Okay, so again, same number, one positive, one negative. We have two options all the time for a square root. Now, your calculator is never going to tell you the negative version. It's never, ever going to tell you the negative version. It's up to you to remember that you also have a negative version, okay, a negative square root of 0.0016. So when you're asked for both, you can certainly still use your calculator, okay? No problems there. You can always use your calculator. But just remember that your calculator is only telling you the positive, not the negative, all right? The only other thing that I want to mention is, I believe also in your IXL practice tomorrow, you might see something that's a little bit crazy, where they ask you to do something like this. Okay, they ask you to do the square root of a fraction. When we do the square root of a fraction, you guys, we don't have to freak out about it. You can just do the square root of the top number and then do the square root of the bottom number. Okay, you can do them separately. Square root the top number, square root the bottom number, and then again, of course, you always have positive and negative version. All right? That's it for this video. If you have any questions about positive and negative square roots, please reach out to me at some point, email, phone call, or Zoom office hours. Otherwise, that's all I have for you today, and we'll see you soon.